We're going to talk about economics and the field of economics and ethics of economics. As you may know, I often question the ethics of the economic field, and tonight I'm joined by a professional economist who does that regularly as well and has written a book which is called How Economics Professors Can Stop Failing Us, the Discipline Adequate. I'm pleased to welcome Dr. Stephen Payson to join us. Steve, welcome.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Steve has over 32 years of professional experience in economics, having worked as an economic consultant and as an adjunct professor, but mostly as a government economist. He's currently an economist at the U.S. Department of the Interior. We won't talk about government too much. He's also been executive director of a group called the Association for Integrity and Responsible Leadership in Economics and Associated Professions, which is called AirLeap. He was the executive director from 2006 until 2017. AirLeap seeks to study and promote integrity and responsible leadership, and they are a nonprofit organization. And Steve, I should mention, has earned his bachelor's degree from Wesleyan University, his master's degree from the London School of Economics and Political Science, and his PhD in economics from Columbia University in New York. So, Steve, you have been interested in the question of integrity and ethics in economics for a long time. Can you kind of sum up where that interest came from in the course of your career? How did you get so interested in this question?
Well, I've studied economics as a graduate student and then went into economics and worked in various places in economics. And what's so important is economics itself. Economics, to me, is, I devoted my life to it. It's been an extremely important thing, and it's important to so many people. It affects us in so many ways. And it seems like there's the weakest link in the chain of making economics better, and that is in the area of professional ethics and scientific integrity. I think if the profession really embraced scientific integrity and professional ethics much, much better than it does now, then economics would be much better and our economies would be much better.
Wow, that's a big claim. Let's break that down a little bit. First of all, let's talk about what you mean by ethics. I think here at MIT we talk, people talk about scientific ethics, and in the social sciences we talk about the ethics of working with human subjects. Are you talking economics as a hard social science, as it likes to think of itself? Is the ethics somewhere in between science and social science? What is the ethics that you're talking about?
Sure. So there's a lot of different angles to ethics and dimensions to ethics. I'm not speaking about ethics in terms of a legal definition, and I'm not speaking about it so much in terms of morality in the way that we might want to care about each other, which is extremely important. But the main area that I'm focused on is the integrity with which economists present and defend the work that they do. I think that the biggest problem in the profession, but especially in academia, is that there's too much focus on the show business character of the profession, and there's too many. Some professors are very good professors and very good researchers, and they do great work. Unfortunately, I think they're in the minority, and I think that most professors, especially at the highest, most prominent levels, are so focused on getting top-ranked journal articles and getting their graduate students to produce top-ranked journal articles and to win research grants in various ways and to get a lot of attention and be promoted to higher positions, that their economics itself it takes on a very show business character where they're not where they're less interested in studying the true reality of the economy, and they're more interested in impressing peers and advancing in their career.
So having kind of gotcha results, something that gets attention, something different, doing something that people haven't done before. But what's the problem with that? Are you saying that they are presenting their results dishonestly?
In a way, it's dishonest because they're not focused on a true belief in the causality of the things that they're studying and in what really causes economic phenomena to exist. I think there's a variety of problems that come out of this, but I think the biggest one, the sort of the 500-pound gorilla in the room, is the disconnect between economics as it is used to influence or even govern policies and the economics that is produced in academia. And because there's such a disconnect between high-powered, highly mathematical, highly esoteric theory and what people need to know to make the best policies, there's come to be a disbelief in economics itself. In other words, there's been so much attention to esoteric, irrelevant publications that a lot of people in the policy area feel that a prominent economist can basically come up with anything and have a very highly sophisticated, highly published, and highly cited theory that then provides no guidance or even the wrong guidance to policy, and is just sort of in the limelight of academia. And we've seen this happen in the financial crisis, or prior to the financial crisis of 2008, where people like Stiglitz and Krugman and Robert Solow have basically said we were focused too much on our fancy models without trying to understand the true reality behind what's really going on in the economy.
And has that gotten better since 2008?
I would have to say that some things definitely have gotten better in terms of keeping track of the financial institutions, and the kind of crisis that we had in 2008, I think is much less likely to happen. But I think that's more having to do with due diligence on the part of the financial community and the banks and that area. I think in terms of academic economics, we're still set in our old ways of just paying too little attention to what's really going on in the economy.
I'm speaking with Dr. Stephen Payson. He is an economist for the government, and he is also he's the founder and former executive director of the Association for Integrity and Responsible Leadership in Economics and Associated Professions. You could just call it AirLeap. It is easier. You've been an adjunct professor at numerous universities, but you're not, a full-time professor. Does it make it easier for you to critique academic economics?
I think the fact that I don't hold a position in a full-time position in a university makes it easier, especially if I'm not in a university that offers doctorate degrees and that keeps track of the publications of its faculty and expects its faculty to receive grants and that kind of thing, because I believe most academics in higher ranking universities are assumed to also play a role in the public relations of the university, to make the university appear attractive and make the department appear attractive, and to basically not make waves. And this is a part of the problem. I think that the problems that I've identified are kind of well known, but everybody's quiet about it. And one of the reasons why professors are quiet about it is they don't want to get into any trouble complaining.
Well,
so
that's
my
true
not being a professor.
Yeah. That's true not just in economics.
Yeah.
But so forgot what I was going to say. Okay. Well, let's look at the book. So the title of your book is How Economics Professors Can Stop Failing Us, the Discipline at a Crossroads. You are looking at, you call out professors of economics for their overall lack of ethics, integrity, and responsible leadership. That does not make you popular with them, does it?
Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. I was recently asked to give a presentation by professors in the Houston area, and I was in a room with about 30 professors, and they had invited me to speak, and they had bought copies of my book, and they had very, very favorable things to say about the book. I think I'm a voice for a lot of professors who are afraid to speak, because I think I'm identifying a lot of systematic problems with the profession that a lot of professors agree with. But I still hold accountable the most prominent professors in the universities who may run blogs and complain about the same things I've complained about in various ways, especially as they did after the Great Recession, but they're not going the extra mile of changing the incentive system for the hiring and promotion of professors, and that's the nut that needs to be cracked.
Well, talk a little more about that. What is this incentive system, and what parts of it need to be changed?
So basically, we have a system where professors, especially at the highest ranking universities, are expected to publish in technical journals and publish in the highest ranking technical journals that they can, and to do it as rapidly as they can. And they're hired for that purpose. They're expected to do that. And it's gotten to the point that involves so many games and so many strategic maneuvers on the part of professors that is peripheral to the professor's responsibility of truly understanding what's going on in the economy. They're basically playing a game like chess that has very little to do with understanding economic science. And they're all in this competition. And the fear is a prisoner's dilemma problem for those who are familiar with economics, that if one university says, oh, no, we don't need to do this, we're going to hire professors who really care about what's happening in the economy and who don't care about publishing in the American Economic Review, well, those universities are going to stop, those departments are going to stop getting as many publications, and then they're afraid they're going to be losing in the game that they play. So it really requires universities and the leaders of them and the departments to step up and say, we've got to seriously question this entire game and create a new set of rules.
Well, I imagine that the foundations and funding sources for economic research do not really want to fund this kind of work. Is that right?
Well, I think there's a lot of confusion and misunderstanding about all this. Some funding organizations are led by people who themselves have strong understanding of what is expected in research. And so they do try to drive for better research and grants that are more useful. So there are useful grants. I'm not saying that it's all bad. But then you have other foundations that really just basically trust whoever is the most prominent professors at the most prominent universities, and basically let them put their hand in their pockets and take out the grant money that will go to their graduate students and things like that, based on very esoteric, very fancy research that they continue to do.
Well, I'm talking with Dr. Stephen Payson. He's an economist and the author of the book, How Economics Professors Can Stop Failing Us, the Discipline at a Crossroads. So a lot of the economists and others that I speak with criticize the field of economics because of its neoliberal bias, because of its bias in favor of the status quo, in favor of elite thought. Your perspective is really coming at it as an insider of the economics profession, talking about the way that the process, the methodology of research. Is that right?
Right. But I can speak to the.
Oh, we always like to hear that. Go ahead.
Yeah. So one thing. So I consider myself a pluralist, and in the book itself, I have a chapter that can be considered that, and I've published a couple articles in different pluralist ways. But one thing that I would criticize the pluralists as being somewhat naive about this whole issue in two senses. A lot of pluralists, I had recently gone to the ICAT conference, and I heard many recent things.
Can you say what that is?
Oh, that's the International Confederation of Associations for Pluralism in Economics.
And maybe you could explain in a sentence what pluralism is.
Okay, pluralism, as I understand it, and there aren't pluralists here to correct me, is just the general view that we shouldn't have a single particular model or framework for understanding the economy and what happens in the economy, that there are a lot of alternative frameworks that have different things to offer in terms of understanding economic phenomenon, and that we should consider all of them or all the ones that have relevance to any particular problem, and we shouldn't be wedded to one particular framework.
Mm-hmm. And you are a pluralist? More or less?
I would consider myself to be, yeah.
You said, yeah.
But I wouldn't consider the book to be a pluralist book overall.
Because?
Because it approaches what I was going to say before. It approaches the issue that in order for when I was saying pluralists are a bit naive, what I mean by that is that there's a belief that when we speak to neoclassical economists who aren't pluralists, that their assumption is made, the naive assumption is that they will try to understand arguments that are being made for what the best theory is. And I'm sorry to say that a lot of economics professors are not very interested in truly finding out what is the best theory. So a lot of pluralists speak to non-pluralist professors thinking that they're hearing them. And in a way, they're not hearing them. And my book is about how academic economists often have trouble hearing what the problems are in the economy because they're too busy playing their game, where they may hear it as at a personal level, but they may even agree with pluralism at a personal level, but they won't let it enter into their models or enter into their published work or even their lectures because they are too busy in the show business aspect of their profession.
Is economics a science, and should it be? Should it be thought of that way, or should it be thought of as a social science that is attempting to quantify things that are really hard to quantify, like human behavior?
So there's kind of two questions in your question, as I see it.
That is true.
One is whether or not it is a science, and then the question is whether or not it should be a science if it isn't one. I guess I would look at it that way. So, and I actually wrote an article a long time ago about this issue of whether or not economics is a science. I strongly believe economics is a science, and it's also a social science, and I don't think the two are mutually exclusive or that kind of thing. I think it's an extremely important science, and the more scientific it is, the better it will be. That doesn't mean that there are unknowns, and there's a lot. It's not as convenient in a lot of ways as chemistry or physics because You are studying human behavior, but science does study human behavior. Psychology and sociology are sciences too, and they study human behavior.
I didn't know about
I think if we say that it is not a science, we're kind of like giving it a free hand to be as unscientific as we want it to be, and then it becomes it could become so political and so removed from the responsibility of truly understanding causality.
Well, that's interesting. I could debate that, but we're not in debate mode here. Also, we're running out of time. And I want to mention that the book is available, and the title of the book is How Economics Professors Can Stop Failing Us, the Discipline at a Crossroads. And it's not a secret that if you search for it, you might find 50% off somewhere on the website. It's published by Lexington Books, came out in 2017. And I should say that you're in town for the Economics Association, Eastern Economics Association conference. Can you sum up in a minute how your experience has been there? Anything exciting happen? Any new performances by show business types in economics? Or any interesting new findings that we should know about?
I haven't encountered too many. I've seen some, interesting work being done there. Some on climate change. I'm also in town to give a couple presentations at universities. So last night I was at Boston University. I spoke to their Economics Students Association, and tomorrow I'll be at Northeastern to also speak to their Students Association. So I'm, multitasking while I'm in town.
Well, that's great. But then you have to go back to Washington, D.C.
Yes,
sorry about that. But that's your choice, so you're good with that.
Right.
So I've been speaking with Stephen Payson, and he's an economist at the U.S. Department of the Interior in Washington, D.C. But they set him free for a long weekend, and here he is in Boston. Steve, thank you so much for joining us on What's Left, and thank you for your work on behalf of ethics in a profession that needs more.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thanks for having me.
And you're listening to WMBR in Cambridge,